our first Hoop City deep dive, and I am pleased to be joined today by my good friend and very special guest, Ben Golliver from the Washington Post. Ben, welcome back to Edmonton. Welcome back to Canada. And we were talking right before we jumped online. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, likewise. I got it circled on my calendar every time we get a chance to chat. And the great news is that it's, we're in the middle of the season where there's so many new storylines, so many new narratives to kind of dissect and try to separate fact from fiction this time of the year where it's, a lot of new faces, a lot of new teams, surprise teams, that kind of stuff. It's always great to try to make sense of it with you.
Ben, in starting with that, normally I think we start at 30,000 feet and work our way down, but I think we're going to go the opposite way today because you've had two very, I think, relevant experiences in the last 2 days with teams, players, and games of the NBA that really, I think, bring out what is unique, special, and new about the 25-26 NBA. So let's start last night. You were at the Lakers-Spurs game, tightly contested, very interesting last couple of minutes. But talk about what you're seeing with the Lakers, with the Spurs, with the Wemby phenomenon. I just can't wait to hear what you saw last night firsthand.
Well, let's start with the Spurs side of it, because that's what I really think is the most fascinating. I mean, the Lakers have been an amazing story, too. We definitely don't want to skip over them. But you look at the Spurs, they are in the middle of what I'm calling the extreme makeover of Victor Wembanyama. Rarely do you see a star player of his magnitude. I mean, he's an all-star last season, an MVP candidate last season before he goes down with the blood clot. Completely change how they want to score the basketball from one season to the next. So last year, everybody remembers he was taking a lot of three-pointers, a lot of off-the-dribble three-pointers. He was doing less damage in the paint. He was dunking probably less frequently than most people expect for a guy who's 7'4". And so it really became this philosophical question of like, well, how does Wemby envision himself on offense? Is he just trying to be a perimeter player? One interesting metric I use to track, how players score or, their assertiveness level is to just compare their three-pointers to their free throws, right? Obviously, if you're taking a lot of threes, you're probably not getting fouled. If you're getting fouled a lot, you're going into the paint, you're probably not taking as many three-pointers. If you look at Wemby's numbers from last year, he was actually the most comparable to guys like Steph Curry, LaMelo Ball, Donovan Mitchell, a lot of smaller guards who spend almost all their time on the perimeter. That's not really what we envisioned when we heard that there was a giant coming to the NBA from France, right?
Right.
So it was an unusual turn for them. But, San Antonio had its reasons for trying to do that. They didn't have a ton of spacing. They don't have a ton of talent around Wembanyama. He is a very willing shooter, and he can shoot the ball pretty well. He can get hot. And so they were trying to just encourage that, see, experiment with it, see how it goes. Well, after his blood clot, he traveled the world. It sounds like he really went on a spiritual journey, a mental journey, and also a physical strength development journey. And he has come back playing completely differently. So the three-point shots are way down. The dunks are way up. The free throw attempts are way up. And so now if you compare him, instead of, being similar to a Steph Curry or a LaMelo Ball or a Donovan Mitchell, now if you compare his three-pointers and his free throws, he's comparable to guys like Anthony Davis and Zion Williamson, guys who are going to do most of their damage around the hoop, who are going to be, putting a lot of pressure on opposing teams' interior defenses, right? So he's not quite to the Giannis level where he's taking no threes and only getting fouled constantly, but he's really trending that direction. And so for me, it's such a fascinating developmental story because I can't think of another player who 1 year could play like Steph Curry and the next year could play like Zion Williamson. That's like the two most different players you could imagine, right? And here's Wemby kind of, trying on different costumes and seeing which ones will fit. So there's been some real success, though, with the new shift. There's been some challenges, too, but the successes have been San Antonio off to its first 5-0 start ever in franchise history. They've since lost a couple games. Wemby was a player of the week, recipient. He was putting up 40-point games, right out of the gate against the Dallas Mavericks. And he's starting to look stronger on the ball maybe than he did in past years. And so it's just really interesting. The NBA is obsessed with threes, and now its brightest young star is saying, you know what? I needed to cut my three-point habit. I needed to go the other direction. I need to get back in the paint a little bit.
Well, what's interesting too, Ben, about what you're describing right now is it takes a 21-year-old kid going on a spiritual journey to hit people over the head, with something that you would think would be obvious. but in the NBA, it when a trend hits, as we know, the sheep are just running for the gate, and everybody tries to mimic it, whether it's small ball, Europe, drafting Europeans back in the day, like everything trends, drafting guys out of high school. But Wembanyama, you're absolutely right. When you watch the young man play now, his blend of skill, gifts, length, they're just off the charts. The way he's changing shots, his awareness, his basketball IQ, everything about how he plays is so at a higher level, not just physically, but in terms of maturity as well. What do you think that the Spurs have done around him that's helped them off to a pretty good start? Like you said, 5-0, when you start talking about first time in franchise history and you look back on that franchise, my goodness, that's saying something. But we're in the snapshot phase. We're not into the stretch run or anything like that. But what do you think the Spurs have done well around him, and what do you think there are some areas with their present personnel that they can do even better to build on this man's impact on the game?
No question, we haven't seen the best from him or the Spurs yet. I mean, there's definitely still a lot of room for improvement here in the short term. You did mention his defensive impact, and I don't want to gloss over that. I mean, I know my entire opening commentary was about his offensive game. The reason for that is because his defensive game hasn't really changed. He's still the best defensive player in the NBA already, right? So he's like, right. He was before the blood clot in his shoulder. He is after the blood clot in his shoulder. He blocks so many shots. He scares so many people who drive to the basket. He is such a coach pleaser, a coach's pet on the defensive end. He just wants to make every play, and he wants to grab every rebound, contest every shot, make every rotation, hustle back on defense. And so that part is just rock solid. And the experimentation part is really coming with how to best use him on offense. Now, I think Wemby will benefit from more time with their best guards. And when I look at their best guards right now, the player he's really had the most time to gel with has been Stephon Castle. Stephon Castle is a very athletic guard. I view him as a two guard. I view him as a very quality defensive player on ball, just physically imposing guy, a lot to like from his game. But I do not view Stephon Castle as a point guard. And so what happens is when Wemby plays with him, it winds up putting a lot of the burden on Wemby to be the creator. And sometimes that leads to turnovers. Against the Lakers, it led to a lot of offensive foul calls. When Wemby plays in traffic, you can kind of use his height against him because the ball has to, go so far when he dribbles it. You can get a lot of poke steals. You could just try to get deflections, as he's trying to get that ball from his very high waist all the way to the ground and back. And then also because he's so long, you could get up underneath him and kind of bother him that way. And so I actually don't love Wemby when he's in that creator role. I think he's a better play finisher than he is a play starter. And so that's really where it gets exciting because the Spurs have drafted Dylan Harper with the number 2 pick. And then they made a trade last year for De'Aaron Fox, who really hasn't had a chance to play with Wemby since coming over from the Sacramento Kings because he's been injured. Both those guys are very good at putting downhill pressure on defenses. They're good at making decisions. They're good at keeping their big men involved. They're good at running the pick and roll, right? Dylan Harper reminds me a little bit of a young James Harden when he attacks the hoop. And then De'Aaron Fox for years has been known as one of the fastest players in the league. And when he was in Sacramento, he made an all-star team because he had a really good partnership with Domantas Sabonis, right? And obviously Wemby's a much more skilled big man than Domantas Sabonis. So what I think we're going to see as this season unfolds, it's going to be less burden on Wemby because you're going to have those guards who are going to be doing a lot more of the initiation, a lot more of the attacking. And what I want to see is more finishing from Wemby. So I want to see more lob passes to him. I want to see more, don't bring the ball down to your waist. Just take a pass in the post and go straight back up with it. I think we're going to see a lot of free throws once he has guys setting him up for really high percentage looks. Teams are just going to be forced to foul him even more than they already do, because that's going to be the only way you could prevent a dunk or a layup. And I think that's going to be much more healthy for him, because around those other guys, they're still pretty lacking in talent. They got some helpful veterans here and there. They bring in Luke Cornett, a quality center. But for the most part, this has been the Wemby show this year. And that's why they need to get Harper and Fox back healthy. And I think you're going to see their offense really take off when that happens.
Great summary. Let's talk about the Lakers now. They have not been fully healthy, obviously. LeBron has not played a minute as of yet. We've got Luka off and on with some injuries out of the gate. But I'll tell you, Austin Reeves, is that a revelation, or is this just a maturation process? Did you ever expect, and again, it's early in the season, but Austin Reeves averaging over 30 points a game, and he's dominant when he's in the game. Like, he has a versatile offensive game now, and the confidence level of Austin Reeves is off the charts. How does he fit with Luka? How do you like how the new fit Luka is flowing with the Lakers? And what do you think their prospects are? Ayton he actually looks like a basketball player, Ben. For a long time, it was one of those guys, he walked in the gym with a guy, I wonder if that guy, he should be good. And then he goes out there and he wasn't. Now he is. So he seems to be finding a little bit of himself as well. How good do you think the Lakers can be?
Well, they look really good right now. They're a great study in not overreacting to opening night, because if you go look at their opening night loss to Golden State, they look like a broken one-man team. It was like, here's Luka going to have to do everything. Nobody else has any chemistry. All these thrown together free agents. Ayton really wasn't making much of an impact. Marcus Smart, all he's doing is flopping. He's not really helpful in any other way. And you're just thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a long wait for LeBron to come back, because this team was built around the two stars, LeBron and Luka, and they don't look right if they only have one of them. Well, it's just one of those things where, pretty much they woke up the next morning, snapped their fingers. All of a sudden, they're a real team. All of a sudden, Austin Reeves looks like an all-star. All of a sudden, Luka's right back there in the MVP conversation, averaging basically 40 points a game. And the role players are really finding ways to contribute. The Portland Trailblazers paid DeAndre Ayton to go away. There's no chance the Lakers would pay this version of DeAndre Ayton to go away. I mean, they want to keep him around as long as possible because he's really having an impact on both ends. So most of the credit here, in my mind, goes to Luka and Austin Reeves. Luka is definitely in better shape. His comportment with the officials and his focus during games is significantly better than it was last season, and he's just a happier guy. Everyone has someone like this in their life where they run hot or cold, right? And their mood impacts the entire room. So if they're in a great mood, everyone's having the time of their life. Well, this could be your uncle, this could be your cousin. But if they're in a bad mood at Thanksgiving, well, it kind of spoils the whole event for everybody. And that's Luka. It just is. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He can't fake it. When he's in a good mood, he's got the widest smile you could possibly imagine. He looks like he could play basketball, for 48 minutes a night. When he's in a bad mood, it looks like he's just walking up the court is hard for him, right? And he doesn't want to play defense, and he's bickering and yelling at different people. He used to yell at Coach Carlisle back in Dallas, years ago, and he's just cut down on a lot of that stuff. It's clear he's in a really great mind space, so kudos to him. Now, the Austin Reeves development is fascinating because it's a reminder of just how many possessions LeBron uses, right? Because there's a lot of possessions that they have to fill in when LeBron's out. And so it's been the ultimate green light for Austin Reeves. And he's a great development story, case study for high school coaches or dads who have children. Learn to play every role. Austin Reeves is great as a third option. He's the kind of guy who can score without stepping on the star's toes, but also without fading too far into the background. He just knows how to strike that right balance as the third option. If you need him as the number two option, he will step up and he'll make it look like Luka and Austin Reeves are the best backcourt in the entire NBA. He's able to create a little bit more with the ball in his hands. And if Luka happens to be out too, Austin Reeves takes over the whole show, and now he's functioning as a number one option because he has good ball handling ability, good scoring instincts. He can shoot the ball from the mid-range, the three-pointer, and he's very crafty going to the rim, so he gets to the free throw line a lot. But most importantly, on top of everything, he's a willing passer. So it's not going to just turn into pound, 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 and everybody else watches. It keeps guys like Rui Hachimura invested, Marcus Smart invested, some of the other guys like Vanderbilt. It just kind of keeps them involved in the game. It's not a stand and watch thing. And so that's a very rare skill set. I think that's why he is going to be a candidate in this All-Star conversation this year. It's going to be tricky for him to probably get in once LeBron comes back. But it has been a revelation. And I think the biggest takeaway is if you're the Lakers, you're looking at your future saying, hey, we thought this was going to be the Luka era, but now it's going to be the Luka and Austin Reeves era. And maybe if we don't have to pay LeBron, we can get those guys some real help and be really good next year. So we'll see how that shakes out.
I'm really glad that you brought up how people should be watching a player like Austin Reeves if they're truly trying to develop their kids. Let's use the parent example that you used, Ben. I think that's really important because I'm actually going to be doing a series on basketball development and the influences that youth have to, I think, contend with, that parents have to contend with through the course of this year, because it distresses me to see so many kids, what I consider to be so badly misled by YouTube coaches who have no clue about what true overall development means. And you look at a guy like Austin, who grew up in the U.S. system, who has developed his game in such a in a more sophisticated way. Maybe that's not the right term exactly. It's well documented. You look at the Joker, you look at Luka, and you look at the European systems and the way they develop players in a different way in different areas. But Austin Reeves bridges that gap. He takes a lot of the advantages the American system has in terms of just raw amounts of talent, but adds in that sophisticated overall balanced game. And you can certainly refer to SGA as well as North American examples that you can build an overall well-rounded game in the U.S. now, as opposed to just the one-on-one player.
Oh, 100%. And you're going to be better off for it if you do, right? I think when you look at Austin, it's a blessing in disguise for him that he wasn't the five-star recruit, that he wasn't getting, Duke and Kentucky and all these guys, banging down his doors, that he wasn't getting trainers and skill coaches to say, hey, the only thing that matters is if you could score 25, because you're going to get a max contract if you could score 25 points, right? He kind of had to keep earning it at every level. And the way to keep earning it at every level was to learn how to make winning plays, right? And to fill out your game as much as possible. So, his handle is excellent, right? I mean, you could see him working in a gym with some of those one-on-one trainers, and he could do every single move that a lot of those guys would want him to be able to do, right? But it doesn't take it away from the mentality of it's actually a 5-on-5 sport. Everybody has to be involved. There's an opportunity if it's a late clock situation. That's when I go through a whole bunch of dribble moves to get a shot because we need a shot, right? If there's 22 seconds left on the shot clock, that's not the time for me to pound the air out of the ball, right? That's the time for me to move off ball, get Luka involved, make a cut, set a screen for somebody, and keep everybody involved there, like we were saying earlier. So, look, it's easier said than done. And there's a reason why a lot of these, skill traders are popular is because, they're selling a pretty simple formula: score points, get money, right? And that's very intoxicating for a lot of people. But I think, for people who truly value the sport and competition, and certainly that's Austin. I mean, this guy clearly loves the game, and, he loves golf too. He's just one of these guys, sort of like his coach, JJ Redick, just a competitive psycho, right? I think for guys like that, it's not really about the money. Obviously, you're trying to make a really good living. You're trying to sell sneakers and have a good time. But really, it's about trying to go win gold medals with Team USA. In Austin's case, played for the World Cup team. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's back on this Olympic team in a couple of years. I think he'd be a really good fit there. And it's also about trying to compete for championships and playing in the playoffs. And he's certainly had a number of runs already with the Lakers, even though he's pretty early in his career.
Last thing on the Lakers, I'm glad you mentioned JJ Redick, because I have to admit, Ben, when Redick was named the coach of the Lakers, I was not. I was very, very lukewarm towards whether it might or might not work out. But so far, I have to give him high marks, and I think that has really shown up this year. He seems to be progressing rapidly in his ability, not just to manage elite personnel and all the requirements that they have on and off the court, but in terms of building his staff and getting the teams to buy in. Thus far, he's been very successful.
Well, they have forged some really strong relationships within that organization. So you look at JJ and Luka, they had a relationship kind of going back to JJ's playing days. So I think that he started with a level of trust that maybe some other coaches who had worked with Luka didn't have necessarily right off the bat. And so I think that really helped JJ. And ultimately, he's going to, JJ's smart enough to realize, when you have a player like Luka, 90% of your reputation as a coach is going to be based on how well Luka plays, because Luka has the ability to single-handedly take a team to the finals, right? So getting the best out of Luka, knowing when to challenge Luka, and we heard it from JJ at the end of last season. He said, we need to be in championship shape, and we knew who he was talking about, right? He's saying basically, Luka, you got to lose weight, and you got to come back better. Now, let's use as a contrast Isalo in Memphis, right? Well, he has a confrontation with Ja Morant in the locker room because Ja's not playing hard. Well, Ja goes to the media immediately and basically, throws the coach under the bus. You watch his body language during games. He's jogging through games. He's not happy. He's not invested. It's clear that relationship is not strong. And guess what? It's probably either going to lead to a coaching change in Memphis sometime down the road, or it's going to lead to Ja Morant get traded, or it's just going to lead to a very disappointing season. None of those are good outcomes. And so that's the power of the coach-superstar relationship in the NBA. And JJ has just nailed it with Luka. There's no way around it. Luka's playing some of the very best basketball of his career to start this season. I think the other key relationship, and you never know how this is going to go either, has been between Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick. Now, Rob, he had this whole coaching search. Is he looking at Bobby Hurley, or Danny Hurley? He's, UConn coach. He's looking all around for all these, different candidates. And, it didn't seem like JJ maybe was even the number one option for the Lakers, right? And he didn't have a huge, long contract when he first got hired. But those guys really have had a strong dynamic. If you look at the moves they made this summer, they weren't flashy, but they plugged clear holes. The Lakers needed a center, and they found an opportunity with DeAndre Ayton, right? They needed some wing depth, and they go find a player in Jake LaRavia. They needed some more backcourt defense, just veteran guile. They grabbed Marcus Smart. I mean, these are not moves with super high ceilings, right? But because JJ has a good eye for what he needs from a basketball side of things, and he's able to communicate that to Rob, and Rob trusts his eye, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. Now Rob can go out with his shopping list and bring the kind of guys that JJ needs. So it's worked out very well for the Lakers. And I'll be honest, once LeBron was announced to be out for the first month of the season with this back issue, I thought for sure it was going to be an ugly month, like one of those months where you're just trying to stay 500. And instead, they're arguably the second best team in the league right now, right behind the Oklahoma City Thunder. I did not see that coming.
I'm going to segue in just a second over to the OKC Thunder. I'm talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City. I'm your host, Paul Sir. Here's I was mentioning to you, I have a theory on the Thunder and on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I want to pose this to you and your expertise.
Great. I love theories.
Is SGA the most sophisticated blend of skills in an offensive player that we have seen thus far in the NBA. And this is how I'm going to frame it. You look at Michael Jordan, alpha male, dominant in an era where physical play absolutely defined the NBA, and Jordan's toughness, his skill set, the way he was able to evolve as he aged, like all of those things are a magnificent tribute to him as a competitor. The thing about SGA in today's NBA, I mean, that has to be a bit of an asterisk here, the way team and individuals have to guard, etc. But when you watch SGA play, I really can't find anything that I look at and go, he really needs to do that a little bit better, because he is so far, to my eye, as good as anybody I've ever seen at taking away or taking from the defender what he gives you. Because anytime you're playing defense against a great offensive player, there's going to be a limitation on the defensive side of the ball. And SGA can read that limitation. He's not a phenomenal three-point shooter, but he's a very good three-point shooter by percentages and NBA standards. His mid-range game versatility, from elbow fadeaways to teardrops to pull-ups, are just, again, so situationally, they're executed at such a high level situationally. And then his ability to get to the rim, draw contact, and then he's such a willing passer, often getting double-digit assists. What do you think of my theory, Ben?
Well, I'm contractually obligated as a Michael Jordan stan to never put any player over Jordan in basically any conversation, but you're making a lot of very, very convincing arguments on SGA's behalf. Excuse me. I think, seeing him this week, it is amazing how easy it looks for him when he's not playing elite teams. So, I covered their playoff run pretty carefully last year. You're looking at the Denver series, the Minnesota series, the Indiana series. Now, during all three of those series, there was times where it did look really easy for SGA, right? But you're also getting the kitchen sink thrown at you, double teams, traps, just trying to get the ball out of his hands, make Lou Dort beat you, whatever it might be, try to exhaust Shea. That the Pacers were really trying to just tire him out, right?
Right.
And there were some times there in the finals where there was, slight signs of fatigue from Shea. But when he was just playing like a normal team, like the Clippers, I view them as kind of like an average team. It was like watching a senior in high school play against sixth graders in terms of just the ease with which he was able to do everything. And you mentioned his 3-point shot. That was kind of the scary thing about that Clippers game. There was a few, Harden came out really hot for the Clippers, making all these threes. So that, OKC was in a little bit of a hole, and they're trying to protect their undefeated season. And, every once in a while, somebody like Derrick Jones Jr. would hit a 3-pointer to get the home crowd going in LA. And sure enough, very next possession, Shea would just walk down casually into a 3-pointer and drill it, And it's just one of those things where it's like anything you could do, I could do better,
Right.
It's just backbreakers for the Clippers, who are trying to build this momentum. And here he is kind of controlling it. I think he's great at playing the scoreboard. If they're down 6 or 8 in the fourth quarter, he knows exactly what spot to get to cut that to a 4-point lead, right? Or maybe to get a game back to being a one-possession game. He knows when to call his number and how to exploit guys to kind of get a basket when they need it. We saw that on opening night as well against the Houston Rockets, where they had that big comeback. Shea was just ruthless in terms of getting his own offense and keeping OKC within contact and keeping that to be a game. And he's great closing games too, and protecting leads as well. That's what I mean about the scoreboard part. If they're up 2 possessions late, Shea's got the ball, you feel so confident that they're bringing that W home, right? So there is a ton to like with him, but I would also just say that for the Thunder as a whole, and they are a reflection of Shea, they are more confident and better this year than they were last year. And I thought that the masses underrated them last year, at least until the playoffs, because people wanted to see them prove it on the big stage. And they finally did. It took a couple game sevens, but they were really impressive. they are playing this year like they could have the whole team blindfolded and they'd still know exactly what to do, in terms of how they move the ball, where they find people. Defensively, they just are on a string as always, contesting every shot, contesting every rebound, forcing a ton of turnovers, getting the steals and deflections, all that stuff that was really their signature last year. I know they finally lost on the back-to-back last night to Portland, but I think this is a team that we could be talking about with 70 wins this year, especially if Shea stays healthy, because they haven't even had Jalen Williams on the court yet because of a wrist injury. And Chet Holmgren's missed about half their games because they're just taking it easy with this back injury that he's got. So they're playing like kind of undermanned most of these games, and they're still killing teams by like 15 or 20 points. Like that Clippers game I was talking about, they get off to a 10-point hole in the first couple minutes of the game. They win by 20 by the end of it, and it could have been 30, except they rested Shea for the entire garbage time. They didn't need him. So it's just, the way they can flip switches on teams, it's really impressive. It reminds me of the KD and Steph Warriors. That's pretty much the only other team from my writing tenure these last 20 years that I really think is on that same level in terms of their ability to run away from the opposition. So I think that I came in with high hopes for the Thunder. I picked them to go back-to-back this year, which would be the first time in a while that's happened in the NBA. And they were even more impressive in person than I expected.
Well, and I think you're right. When you don't have Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren with you at all in Williams' case, and Chet for part of a good part of the opening of the season, and you have enough new blood in the mix and in the rotation that it's given them a lift. But the continuity between last year's team and this year's team is still there, and they still seem to have that tremendous almost youthful cohesiveness that they had last year as they ran to the championship. Very daunting for the rest of the league. And going to your comment, Ben, on Shea making it look easy, that's one of the things I think when people get to see the NBA live, that certainly really stands out with me and with people I talk to, is that the great players look like they're playing slowly. Luka, Jokic, Shea, they look like they're playing slowly. Their ability to control tempo, pace, change of speed, change of direction, lift, duck, whatever it requires, their footwork, it really is something to watch with the surgical precision that they play with, and how, again, they take what the defense gives them and they're able to counter it with a very effective offensive play.
Well, I think that's the best comparison between Shea and Jordan. There is nobody in the NBA now, and there was nobody in the NBA at Jordan's prime who could guard him one-on-one. You could try a small guy. You could try, people used to say, well, maybe Scottie Pippen would be the best guy to guard Jordan. Maybe Jordan faces tougher matchups in practice than he does on the court, right?
Right.
Because of Pippen's incredible defensive profile. But there's no chance. Jordan's getting 30 on Pippen every night if they had to go head-to-head like that. And with Shea, you could imagine some of these best defenders. Like you could imagine a Lou Dort, kind of the same thing with his teammate trying to guard him. Or you could imagine Amen Thompson. You could imagine trying to use a bigger or longer wing defender on Shea. But it really doesn't matter who you're putting on him. He is going to get either to the rim or to his mid-range shot. And he shoots the 12-footer almost as good as a layup, and he shoots the 16-footer not much worse than that. So that's why in the playoffs, he has reached that status where it's like, if it's a tight game, if it really matters, games in the balance, you have to get the ball out of his hands. And, he does a good job of protecting it as well. There's been some other guards in the past, I think about Curry, I think about Harden, who maybe, sometimes turnovers was their Achilles heel, right? Where if they would face a lot of pressure, they get tired late in games. The burden started catching up to them. Maybe the turnovers would be the thing that kind of cracks. And with Shea, you just don't really have a lot of those moments in your mind about like, oh, what a backbreaking turnover from him in the fourth quarter. It's like, that's not really who he is. He's just so sound and solid. And, luckily he's surrounded by a whole bunch of guys who are pretty good playmakers in some cases, but also a lot of good shooters on that OKC team. who can, make use of those opportunity situations when he does get doubled.
So Ben, I'm glad you brought the name Harden up, because when I think about a complete offensive player at his peak, James Harden was almost impossible to guard as well. I think 1 year he averaged 1 year over 37, correct?
Yeah, that sounds right. It was the most since Jordan, I believe, in 88?
Yeah. But when it came to the playoffs, teams could tee off on him. Teams could alter him. He didn't seem to have the physical conditioning at times, and maybe it was injuries, whatever it was. But he would fade. He would not be able to deliver. He would not come through. And it appeared to be both a mental and a physical shortcoming. That is the difference between Shea, and he certainly, like you said, people wanted to see it be proven. Well, it was proven last year. And now they come out of the gate. They look very, very good, very, very dominant. I was on a show yesterday before the Blazers game, and the host was saying, are they going to lose this year? And I said, well, let's see what happens tonight. But because Portland's been one of the, there's a number of teams in the NBA, Ben, that are certainly surprising. Portland, I don't think you can quite say they're a huge surprise, but they're playing pretty darn well. Certainly the Spurs that you mentioned, but Chicago, I think we expected Detroit to be building on its momentum from last year, but Chicago in the East, the Knicks to me are better than I expected them to be. Philadelphia 76ers, people are no longer saying Nick Nurse can't coach. and their rookie Edgecombe has been just fantastic out of the gate. And my gosh, the play, here I just drew a blank, but the play of Maxey has been incredible. It's been actually a really fun start to the season, hasn't it? With some of these new stars and some of these resurrected and teams finding their stride early. What do you take out of all of that? Are there some that can sustain this through the entire season?
Well, one thing I thought about coming into the season was this idea that, let's do myth busting, fact or fiction on some of the criticisms of the NBA, right? Yes. So you hear, well, they shoot too many 3-pointers. Well, I think we can all agree on that one. That's fact, right? I mean, they take a lot of 3-pointers in the NBA these days, right?
Right.
But there's another one. Well, nobody plays defense. Well, okay, the scores are high, no question about it. But if you watch the Oklahoma City Thunder, you might say that's the best defensive team you've ever seen in your life. So
absolutely,
you can't say nobody plays defense, right? And another one that I hear a lot is that it's, everybody plays the same way. There's no diversity in terms of how teams play, and that's kind of related to this idea of everyone shooting a lot of 3-pointers, a lot of spread pick and roll, and it's kind of all the same thing, right? But if you look at some of these teams that are having success early in the league, I think that completely undercuts the idea that everybody plays the same way. For example, Portland, what are they doing? Well, they're doing what Nolan Richardson would be proud of. They're full court pressing basically the entire game.
That's
Nobody's heard of 48 minutes of hell in the NBA except maybe Rick Pitino, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That didn't go so well for him. So they're bringing that back. And so that you can't say, everybody's full court pressing. They're not. That's a very unique Portland identity, right? You look at Miami. I have never seen a team push the tempo as fast as Miami. I mean, they make the 7 seconds or less Suns or the Showtime Lakers, they make them look like tortoises. These guys, after makes, after free throws, doesn't even matter. After any inbounds play coming out of a timeout, they are push. So that's different, right? And they're also basically not calling plays, and it's just sort of like you drive to the rim and kick out, and then it's my turn to drive to the rim and kick out. There's no pick and rolls, there's no plays, nothing. So they're kind of in their own category. And then with Chicago, they've undergone a real transition where a couple of years ago, they were maybe the most boring team to watch in the NBA because it was DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic, 3, pretty good but not great veterans who didn't really fit together and it didn't really make each other better. Well, now they've got a whole bunch of young guys who are running around all over the court. Matas Buzelis, Josh Giddey. There's a little bit of international flair with Giddey running point. You got Vucevic now back engaged, so he's playing a more entertaining style. Their defense has been really impressive to start the season. They're just flying all over the place. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't the same old Chicago Bulls. This looks different. You drop in, Edge come into Philly, like you mentioned. Rarely do rookies have a transformational impact on their situation, right? And yet here he comes, and it's like everybody's happier. It's like the sun's shining brighter, the water tastes better. It's like he's kind of like scrubbed some of the stain of the Joel Embiid injury from last year and the Paul George injury from last year. He's kind of scrubbed it out of the way and said, hey, we're a new team. We're not just about Embiid in the process. We're about some young guards who are going to combine to score 60 or 70 points on you on any given night. So that's been a new look and a variation for them as well. What about the Houston Rockets? They are getting almost half of their shots that they miss. They are collecting the offensive rebound. That's insane. They play so big. They got bigs practically playing 2 through 5 in their rotation, right? There's been times Kevin Durant has started at center in his career or played center, and now he's playing 2 guard, so that shows you how big they are. And so, of course, they're getting every single offensive rebound because they're just, they're kind of built to do that. So it's another example of a team that plays very differently than others. And so that's really, to me, what's been the rewarding part of the start to this season is that you could just point to like 7 or 8 different success stories, and every single one of them is happening in a different way. It's not just, we're playing copycat. We're trying to be like the Steph Curry Golden State Warriors, or we're trying to be like the Jason Tatum Boston Celtics. It's like all these different teams have tried to look at their own personnel and say, what makes us good? What makes us unique? And they've tried to maximize that impact. And, of course, by the end of the season, some of those stories are going to work. Some are going to fade back. That's just the nature of professional sports, right? But for right now, it's made it a very, very fun league to watch.
I'm talking to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on Hoop City and the Deep Dive. I'm your host, Paul Sir. Ben, I think that is a ripple effect of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I mean it from this perspective. I think the Thunder have shaken the league up with going with the talent that you have and adapting your system and creating a culture around that talent and around those personalities that work the best. And I see that kind of transformation happening across a lot of the franchises that you mentioned, for one. But I think the concept of culture, which I think is often misunderstood because you're talking about touchy-feely stuff, and and it's not that at all. What it is getting people to blend together and give them the maximum opportunity to be successful based on what they can contribute. So you have to spend the time identifying what that contribution can be. And so a team like Portland early in the season can be successful with, I love that 40 minutes of hell anyway. That's one of the great basketball descriptors of all time, but 48 minutes of hell in the NBA. And yeah, you're right to point out about Rick Pitino, but you had Anton Walker trying to play defense. He never played defense in his life at a serious level. You've got long, athletic, fast, hungry, young players in Portland that want to get after it. And this gives them a chance to get out there and contribute and make their mark because they're still formulating who they are. But Chicago, Philadelphia, I mean, it's really marvelous to see these different personalities. And I totally agree with you. And you use the example of Houston. It's not small ball anymore, and it's not positionless basketball anymore, as Wemby demonstrates. What you have is adaptation and a more intelligent use of the skill sets that each player bring to each organization.
Well, so here's another interesting factor. I like what you said about how OKC is reminding everybody culture matters, right? And you really, if you want to compete, and especially if you're not in a big market, you better have a good culture. You better know exactly what your winning formula is, and you better stick to it, right? And you better have a coach who's on board with that. And certainly Oklahoma City has, all that kind of alignment from the top down. There's another factor. It's a little bit less interesting, but I would actually point to the salary cap because, the NBA came out with a new salary cap system a couple of years ago. And one of the things, the byproducts of that salary cap has been there's been much fewer impact free agents changing teams. And so the shortcut around a bad culture previously was, hey, let's just go sign LeBron, or
Right.
let's go try to trade for, make a big wheel and deal free agency move, and we can like kind of flip everything upside down, and we're going to be better next year. That's really not an option anymore. The best players don't even go to free agency. And so if you do have to kind of trade for one of those best players, if you're Houston with Kevin Durant, if you're Orlando with Desmond Bane, those are some of the biggest names that got traded this past summer. You have to give up a lot of stuff typically to get those guys. You have at least have to give up value. And so the question becomes, okay, well, is a trade really going to take you a huge step forward? Or is it going to take you a half step forward, or maybe even, it's going to make you better at one thing, but it's going to make you worse at something else, right? Like it's just harder to have a home run trade unless you're trading with Nico Harrison. I think it's harder to overhaul your team completely by trade, right? Just because it has to be a two-way street. You got to give something back. And so that's why for a lot of these teams, it comes back to, well, you have to draft well. You have to sign, have a good scouting eye around the margins to try to kind of find some guys who can maybe be better than they have been currently. And then you have to internally develop your players. And so what's interesting about Portland, I think they're a fun case study here, is, they trade for Denny Avdia from Washington. Well, that was a trade nobody talked about at the time. Washington was giving him away because they wanted to tank. Well, he's blossomed into a guy now where he's a most improved player candidate, and he's, almost basically the best player on the Blazers, right?
Right.
A guy like Tumani Kamara, he's a throw into a bigger trade. He's not even the guy they're really trading for. He's just kind of like tacked on to a different trade. Well, guess what? He winds up being an all defensive player, and he's one of those 40 minutes of hell guy you're talking about where he's hounding people up and down the court. And they had to work to develop those players once they grabbed them over these last couple of years. And there's other examples in Portland of guys who are taking step forwards, within their own career. But that's really, this changing salary cap landscape where you can't just go purchase a Band-Aid because Band-Aids aren't available, right? You can't just get a new franchise player on July 1st and change the entire course of your franchise. There's fewer shortcuts than there used to be. And so you got to figure out other ways to do it. And I think Oklahoma City was a genius about that. They were way ahead of the curve, and other teams are now figuring that out too.
Well, and the way you described it was goes back to your remarks about the way the offseason was handled by the Lakers in picking up not flashy players, but good, effective role players. And I think that's where a guy like Redick is so valuable because he led the nation along with Adam Morrison back in the day when he was at Duke and Morrison was at Gonzaga in scoring. But then when he went to the NBA, he was a shooter, a role player in the NBA. So he really understood firsthand what it meant to be effective by playing your role. And I think he's done a great job of identifying that. But that really is permeating throughout the NBA, and the dreaded second apron, as they call it in the NBA salary cap, now has led to more internal, looking inward, organizational development. Like you said, I think you phrase it perfectly. The NBA and the fans are all the better for it because we're watching better basketball teams being developed.
Well, and the crazy part about it is we're looking at Portland as a success story. And their coach just got arrested, so that tells you, it tells you, sometimes the NBA can be a very unpredictable place. But if you have the right, philosophy from a front office group, if you have handpicked good players, they can continue to have success even through some real adversity. I mean, I was talking to some of the Blazers guys. He got Chauncey Billups, their coach, in this gambling scandal. He got arrested. Right after the first game of the season. That's the kind of thing that could blow up an entire year,
Absolutely.
Where everybody's like, hey, wait a minute, get me out of here. I want to be traded. I don't want to be associated with this. Everybody could quit on each other. And instead, I think it's a credit to, the kinds of guys they've got there, a lot of defensive minded players and guys who are on the rise, who are trying to make a name for themselves, that, in some ways, this maybe even brought them together.
Isn't that interesting, too? Because a couple of things jump out at me about that. I think it looks like Billups was really good at compartmentalizing his life because it didn't seem like whatever was happening in the betting rooms was spilling onto the court. At least nothing would indicate that it has. But isn't it amazing that the Jailblazer name comes back to haunt you again? It's like, oh my gosh. Of the Portland, I always think of Portland as drafting big guys with bad feet and Jailblazers. And so it really is interesting. And like you said, it's a tribute to their organization. We're going to have to wrap things up, unfortunately. I'd love to go into more of the betting stuff, but that's the dark side. We don't need to do that. Let's talk about the fun stuff here. Rookies. Cooper, I'm just going to throw some names at you. Cooper Flagg, 1 to 10, his start. And here's the asterisk I'd put by Cooper. What a rotten situation to be put in, to come out of Duke, be just barely 19 years, just turning 19, and asked to play point guard. But his start in the NBA, 1 to 10.
I'm a big Cooper fan. I mean, I think we have to be honest, like you can't separate him from the environment. So,
right.
Based on what my expectations were, I'd probably put him at a 7. It hasn't been horrible. At least he's getting repetitions. At least he's getting opportunities to succeed and fail. I saw him have a line the other night that says he hasn't ever lost this much his entire life. And, we're only 2 weeks into his rookie season. Typically, that's what happens when guys get drafted to teams, at the bottom of the standings. Not a team in Dallas who they thought they were going to be a playoff team coming into this season. And they were building last year like they wanted to be a championship contender. So, it really goes to show you the luck of the lottery can kind of go either direction. I really do think based on his youth, he would have been better served in hindsight to go to a team that was in a full rebuild. Even though he'd still be losing a lot of games, at least there wouldn't be the pressure and the expectations. And at least there wouldn't be the big contract standing in the way of his team trying to find him help who's on his timeline. Guys like Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson are making tons of money for Dallas. And if they ever wanted to pivot and go to a youth movement, those guys are going to stand in the way. So the problem is their veterans aren't good enough to win big now. And they're only going to get worse as they age. And that's going to keep Cooper here in limbo. So honestly, I feel bad for Cooper. I have a lot of sympathy for him because I've been one of his biggest fans, dating all the way back to his high school years. And this is, it's a nightmare scenario for him in Dallas.
Well, it really is. I look at like Klay Thompson's a shadow now of himself.
Oh, yeah, he's done. I mean, he's done.
Yeah, and Davis is Davis. Like it's not a question of if he'll get hurt, it's just when. And Kyrie up in the air when he'll be back and what he'll be like when he comes back. But I agree with you. Edgecombe, 1 to 10.
Oh, I would say 10. I mean, I was really high on him. It's funny, I got in some trouble from some of the draft dorks, Paul, because I was saying, hey, this kid's got a lot of Anthony Edwards to him. Yep. And this was back in March. And they were really like, hey, come on, that was like a sacrilegious thing to say. But I don't think it looks so crazy. I mean, this kid is having a big time impact, as we said, just changing the whole environment, the entire vibe. And, his life story, I'm sure you heard it, but, he's growing up. He's living in his house, had a generator, didn't even have power for years and years and years. It reminds me of Jimmy Butler, kind of being homeless at times in high school, or Giannis. Going through some extreme poverty when he was growing up in Greece. I think it just changes guys' approach to work and their work ethic. You've heard these stories already of him being at the gym with Maxey at 6 a.m. for off-season workouts. That's what you want from your franchise player, that level of investment and buy-in. And boy, he has a ton of physical tools. A super exciting player to watch. I loved that they took him over Ace Bailey. I felt strongly about that throughout the entire process. I thought that was the right pick, and I think it's only going to continue to be proven true as they go forward.
Would Bailey be a 1, 2, or 3?
Yeah, can we just do a pass fail? Is there some way to be nicer about it? I mean,
I know.
Is it his fault? I know. One interesting thing in Utah is they don't give minutes away, right? You have to earn it. That's kind of Will Hardy's philosophy, and he's done that to some of their other young rookies in recent years. Like they start them, but then they bench them. They'll take him out of the starting lineup and say, hey, you're not playing hard enough, so we're not going to start you. And I guess they just decided Ace Bailey's not ready yet. Not a huge surprise to me. He's very young. I thought his game was more raw in terms of development than some the other scouts. But I didn't think it was going to be, 4 points per game bad. I thought it was going to be more like 10 points per game, but there's still plenty of time. And, we don't need to rush to kill him, I don't think.
Oh, and I'm the same way. I mean, the guy's, not even out of his teens. So it's awfully hard to beat up on him. So I'm going to throw out another name, Con Kneppel from Charlotte.
Yeah, just such a winner.
Isn't he fun? Like he's one of those guys you thought might not translate to the NBA, but he's not only translated, but he's showing that he can flourish in this league.
No question about it. And I think that, once he got through that NCAA tournament run, my concerns about him translating really dropped. You see how competitive he is, how he would rise, yes, in the big moments, how he is comfortable handling the ball, comfortable on and off the ball, super smart player. At Summer League, Paul, you'll appreciate this. You know how everybody wants to sit out Summer League if they even crack a fingernail. It's like, oh, I woke up, I slept, my neck hurts because I slept weird on my pillow, so I'm not going to play. So Con Kneppel took a blow to the head. He was bleeding from his head during Summer League. He goes to the back, wraps it up with a bandage, puts a headband on top of the bandage, and comes back out to finish the game. I'm like, this is what we're talking about. This is a true baller, So he became a Summer League legend, in his first Summer League last year in Vegas. But it's kind of similar to Cooper, though. They've got some pieces there in Charlotte who I just kind of wish would clear out of the way,
Yeah.
Like, could they just trade LaMelo and try to reset the clock and start over? And I don't know if there's not a ton of pressure to win there. So, it's not the end of the world, but I'm just not really a LaMelo believer. And I do think that Con has the chance to be the type of guy who helps you build a much better culture, which is something Charlotte's been lacking for almost its entire history, really.
When I watch LaMelo play, I'm thinking from a player standpoint of, my God, he would be hard to play with, even though his assist numbers are gaudy at times, and he really can have his moments. He has such an unpredictability about his game that you don't know where the passes are coming from. You don't know when he's going to take bad shots. He kind of reminds me of Zach LaVine in that way, of you just really don't know what his shot selection is going to be on any given night. But I agree with you. They should build around Con as opposed to around LaMelo, in my opinion.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, when you play with LaMelo, are you his teammate or are you an extra in the LaMelo movie, right? It's like, are you just kind of background? Are you furniture? Are you watching him do it? Or do you get to be a part of it, right? And I think with the best playmakers, that's never the question. Luka might dominate the ball, but if he finds you open a split second for a dunk, or if he finds you in the corner because your defender is collapsing too far, that ball will be in your hand ready for you to score, right? So if you're his teammate, you got to stay awake. You got to stay ready. If you're LaMelo's teammates, there's a lot of possessions where, hey, we're just watching this guy cook and we'll see where it goes, and I don't think that's super beneficial. But yeah, I'm very high on Con long-term. I'm very high on this rookie class in general long-term. I think between Con, Edgecombe, and Cooper, we're going to have three guys who perennial big-time players, and there could be even more.
Totally agree with you. And what's exciting is
Harper too. I should mention Harper.
Yeah, Harper as well. And one guy I really like is I really am happy to see Creighton's Kalkbrenner come in and be as effective as he has been. Just a traditional big. He works really, really hard. He's shooting like 83% from the field, blocking 2.4 shots a game. I mean, what a great find for a kid like that with low expectations. Second round, comes in, and steps right in and is, doing some really good things.
Well, he's another Summer League legend. I mean, he wasn't bleeding like Con on the court, but he was part of a championship team in Vegas, and he played all the way till the end. Had a really big moments late in that tournament. Like you mentioned, the efficiency is really what stands out. He's never going to take a shot that he's not supposed to, but when he gets the ones he's supposed to, he's very reliable, and that could be very helpful, especially as you look at that core going forward. With or without LaMelo, I think you're going to have Brandon Miller, a very high usage player, and you're going to have Con, who you want to be a pretty high usage player too. That's the kind of big man in Kalkbrenner who you want to play with those types of guys, right? You don't want somebody who says, "Oh, I need more touches. Oh, I
Right.
need, X, Y, and Z." You want a complementary, big man in that role who's got some versatility to him. So, they got some work to fill out that front court. Charlotte does, but he does feel like a keeper.
So my final question, if you would, top 5 for MVP in the early stages: Giannis, SGA, Jokic, Luka, and Wemby, or am I missing somebody?
That's the 5. I would have SGA number 1 right now. And coming into the season, I made some waves, and I did pick Wemby coming into the season, and people thought I was a little bit crazy. I don't feel completely crazy anymore, but they are going to have to win at a pretty good rate for him to actually do it. Because you got some really good players all having great seasons in Joker, SGA, and Giannis, and obviously they've done it before, so voters respect that. Sometimes there could be voter fatigue, but also a lot of times there's kind of an incumbent advantage when, guys can picture you as the MVP because you've already got one. It would be quite the story if Shea goes back to back here. It would really set the tone, I think, for this almost being like the start of the Thunder era. So we'll see if he could do it, but I don't want to give up on Wemby just yet.
You've been very generous with your time today, Ben, and thank you as always for your insights. And this will be the first of many conversations, I hope, through the season. But enjoy the games. You've got the best seat, but the reason you've got the best seat is you're the best writer. So thanks so much for spending time today, Ben.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Great to hear from you, and congrats on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Ben Golliver, the best of the best from the Washington Post, joining us here on Hoop City in the Deep Dive. Ben, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Always a good time. Very, very, very nice to chat.
Likewise. Take care, and we'll talk real soon.
All righty. Take care.
Bye-bye.